What if the greatest danger to a civilization isn't war or disaster, but time itself? Imagine waking up in a city that feels normal. Markets open, children play, leaders argue about tomorrow. No one realizes that this ordinary day will be remembered as the beginning of the end, because the most terrifying collapses in history didn't happen with fire or screams. They happened quietly. Civilizations don't usually fall overnight. They fade. Trade slows. Seasons change. People leave one by one. And centuries later, we look back and say they disappeared. But to the people living it, nothing felt dramatic. Everything felt familiar. Tonight, we explore civilizations that seemed permanent, powerful, unstoppable, until they weren't. Kingdoms swallowed by sand, forests, and silence. Societies that vanished so gently that history barely noticed the moment they were gone. And as their stories unfold, one unsettling thought begins to rise. If they couldn't see it coming, would we? Civilizations rise like slow sunrises, gradually, beautifully, and with a sense of inevitability. Yet history shows us that some of them disappear not with a long fading twilight, but almost as if someone blew out a candle in a quiet room. This section opens by inviting the listener into that strangely delicate space where the past feels both familiar and distant, where entire cultures once thrived with confidence, unaware that the future would remember them only as scattered ruins and whispered mysteries. The goal is not to rush into explanations, but to create a soft atmospheric pull, a sense of drifting backward through time, carried by curiosity rather than urgency. We begin by reflecting on the human belief in permanence. Every generation assumes that its cities will last, that its systems are steady, that its identity is fixed. Yet the stones of ancient capitals now sit in silence, their builders' names erased by wind, water, and the simple passing of centuries. The contrast between the solidity of monuments and the fragility of memory sets the tone. History is not a straight line, but a landscape filled with vanished landmarks. Some societies leave behind towering structures carved into mountainsides. Others leave only faint shadows of pottery, bones, or a single undeciphered symbol. All of them shared the same fate, an end that came sooner than expected, sometimes so suddenly that it still puzzles archaeologists today. The opening gently guides the viewer into this world of overnight disappearances, acknowledging that the phrase itself is a poetic simplification. No civilization truly disappears in a single sunset. They unravel quietly, in ways too subtle for their own people to recognize until it's too late. Crops fail for several seasons, trade routes shift slightly, leaders squabble, and small migrations begin. Yet when these little changes align, they can produce collapse that feels abrupt in hindsight. The listener is encouraged to think of these moments like the cracking of thin ice, silent stress building until it all gives way at once. To create a sense of calm immersion, the narration moves slowly, describing ancient markets that once bustled with life, river valleys lit by torchlight, and seaside ports echoing with chatter. Listeners are reminded that every lost civilization was once as real and ordinary to its inhabitants as our world is to us now. Their sudden disappearance becomes more haunting when we imagine their daily routines. The way children played, elders shared stories, or farmers worked fields that eventually turned to dust. This mix of vivid imagery and gentle melancholy deepens the emotional connection, encouraging viewers to settle into the documentary's meditative pace. As the section flows, it introduces the central contrast driving the entire documentary: what we know versus what we can never recover. Archaeologists can identify collapsed walls, abandoned roads, and fragments of tools, but they cannot reassemble entire lives or revive forgotten languages. This quiet uncertainty is what makes vanished civilizations so compelling. They exist halfway between fact and dream, half illuminated, half hidden in shadow. The script emphasizes this tension softly, suggesting that mystery itself is part of the allure. especially for nighttime listeners who enjoy drifting into reflective thought. The narrative then broadens, inviting viewers to imagine the world as a vast palimpsest, each civilization riding over the faded traces of the one before it. Some write boldly, carving into stone or building on impossible scales. Others leave marks so light that the earth reclaims them almost immediately. Yet they all share the same destiny, to become stories told in fragments, discovered slowly by people living thousands of years later. As the introduction nears its end, it hints at the civilizations that the documentary will explore: desert kingdoms that vanish from trade routes, island empires that dissolved into the sea's whisper, forest cities swallowed by greenery, and enigmatic builders whose monuments outlived their names. Each one offers its own blend of clarity and uncertainty, fact and myth, light and shadow. The transition is gentle, like turning a page in a quiet room, leading the viewer toward the first deep dive mystery waiting just ahead. This ending note prepares the mind for exploration, a slow descent into forgotten worlds, guided by the belief that understanding the past, especially its sudden disappearances, helps us reflect on the impermanence of our own age. The section concludes softly, inviting the viewer to follow the trail of echoes left by civilizations that seem to evaporate overnight. The Nabateans emerge in the historical record like a desert mirage, distinct, impressive, and unexpectedly sophisticated. They were once the masters of the arid landscapes stretching across what is now Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the broader Levant. Their presence grew from scattered nomadic groups into a fully developed kingdom whose trade networks connected the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean world. As we step into this section, the goal is to let the listener feel the quiet grandeur of their realm. The whisper of caravans on sand, the glow of torches reflecting on rock-cut temples, the subtle hum of a society thriving in places where survival itself was an achievement. Yet the calm also carries a faint sense of unease, because this well-adapted civilization, one that engineered water systems deep within one of the driest landscapes on Earth, eventually vanished so silently that history barely noticed the moment it happened. The Nabateans are best known for Petra, the famed rose-red city half as old as time, carved directly into cliffs of sandstone. But Petra was only the heart of their kingdom, not its entirety. From the outside, their civilization appeared almost paradoxical. Desert nomads who became architectural innovators, merchants who built cities of stone, and a society that thrived on movement, yet created structures meant to last centuries. Listeners are gently guided through this contrast, imagining the bustling markets where spices, incense, textiles, and precious stones changed hands under the watchful eyes of Nabatean scribes and traders. Their routes stitched together worlds: Arabia, Egypt, Rome, Judea, and for centuries, their capital cities sat at the intersection of these vital exchanges. Yet, despite such prominence, the Nabateans left behind very few written records. Their inscriptions were sparse, often brief, rarely revealing details about their rulers, beliefs, or internal structure. This creates the first layer of mystery, a civilization so advanced that it could carve monumental facades like Al-Khazna and Ad-Dar, yet so private or selective in its record-keeping that it left behind only whispers. The calm tone encourages listeners to embrace this tension, allowing the silence of their historical footprint to feel as intriguing as the ruins themselves. As the narrative unfolds, the focus shifts to the Nabateans' extraordinary engineering skills. One of the primary reasons their sudden disappearance is so surprising. They mastered hydrology in ways that seem almost ahead of their time, building channels, cisterns, dams, and underground reservoirs capable of capturing every drop of precious desert rainfall. Their water management systems were designed not only for survival, but for flourishing trade and agriculture. These innovations allowed their cities to support large populations and host visiting caravans from across the ancient world. The listener is invited to picture these systems functioning like the hidden veins of a living organism, quietly sustaining a kingdom in a place where life was never guaranteed. And then, unexpectedly in the historical timeline, the Nabatean civilization begins to fade. Not dramatically, not through a singular catastrophic event, but through a kind of historical soft fade, like a painting losing color in slow motion. One of the major theories points to the rise of Roman influence. By 106 CE, the Roman Empire annexed the Nabatean kingdom, transforming it into the province of Arabia Petraea. Yet, unlike other annexations, this takeover appears strangely peaceful. No clear records describe battles, resistance, or political upheaval. Instead, it seems as though the Nabateans simply stepped back from their autonomy, letting Rome absorb their lands. Even more curiously, their cultural identity soon dissolved into the wider Roman world, leaving only scattered evidence of their existence. But Roman conquest alone does not fully explain the disappearance. Even after annexation, many ancient cultures kept their traditions alive for centuries. Why the Nabateans did not, or could not, remains open to speculation. One possibility is the changing trade routes that once fueled their economy. Maritime trade began to eclipse the old overland caravan routes, diminishing the Nabateans' control over incense and spice commerce. A civilization built on movement may have struggled when the world's economic currents shifted to the sea. Slowly, with fewer caravans, less wealth, and declining influence, urban centers like Petra began to empty. Another theory points to environmental pressures. Some scholars suggest that shifts in climate, reduced rainfall, or gradual ecological decline weakened their agricultural foundations. Even expertly designed water systems cannot endure if the rains themselves become unpredictable or too scarce. In a desert, nature's balance is fragile, and a slight disturbance can echo across centuries. The calm narration emphasizes this idea gently, how a society built on careful resource management could be undone not by violence, but by subtle environmental changes. There's also a cultural aspect to consider. The Nabateans were adaptable. Their strengths came from autonomy and flexibility. But under Roman rule, their way of life may have become increasingly irrelevant. Their language, script, and customs slowly blended into those of surrounding populations. It is possible that the people themselves did not vanish. They simply became indistinguishable from their neighbors. Over generations, their identity may have evaporated like morning mist as the desert sun rises. Still, the most poetic and puzzling element remains the archaeological silence. An advanced civilization with monumental architecture typically leaves behind more clues: official records, royal tombs, libraries, substantial texts. The Nabateans left very little. Their disappearance feels less like collapse and more like dissolving. The listener is encouraged to imagine a candle burning steadily for centuries, then going out without smoke or spark. What remains is the stone, the carved faces of cliffs that look outward with serene, empty eyes. The section continues by reflecting on how Petra itself was forgotten by the outside world for nearly 1,000 years, hidden in plain sight among shifting sands and guarded valleys. When it was rediscovered in 1812 by Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, he encountered a city frozen in time. Yet there were no Nabateans left to greet him, no descendants tending ancestral temples. Only the wind threading through carved corridors, carrying stories that had long since drifted out of reach. This leads to the final emotional layer of the section, the contrast between the endurance of stone and the fragility of culture. The Nabateans built wonders capable of surviving earthquakes, erosion, and centuries of abandonment. Yet their names, beliefs, and daily lives vanished with almost dreamlike speed. The listener is invited to stand, mentally, in the narrow gorge leading to Petra, imagining footsteps that once echoed there and the countless lives that flowed through that passage. All gone, all silent. Only the carved city remains. As the section closes, the narration gently guides the viewer toward the next mystery by suggesting that the Nabateans' disappearance is not unique. Across the world, civilizations far larger, more populous, or more interconnected have undergone similar vanishing acts. Some left behind massive earthworks swallowed by forests, others monumental cities reclaimed by rivers, and others still have left almost no trace at all. This smooth transition prepares the audience for the next enigma, the rise and sudden abandonment of North America's forgotten city, Cahokia, waiting in the shadows just ahead. Cahokia rises in the historical imagination like a quiet giant, unexpected, monumental, and haunting in its silence. Long before the first European ships approached the American coastline, a vast city had already risen and fallen in the heartland of North America. Situated near present-day St. Louis, Cahokia was once the largest urban center north of Mesoamerica, a place where tens of thousands lived, traded, worshipped, and shaped earth into towering ceremonial mounds. And yet, like the Nabateans before them, the people of Cahokia left behind no written records, no clear explanation, and no simple clue as to why such a thriving metropolis was suddenly abandoned. This section invites the listener to drift into that lost world, calm, rhythmic, and filled with the gentle hum of unanswered questions. Cahokia's story begins about 1,000 years ago, when small farming villages grew into bustling communities across the Mississippi River floodplain. By the year 1050 CE, something extraordinary was happening. Cahokia exploded in population, expanding with a speed and intensity rarely seen in pre-Columbian North America. The city soon stretched over 6 square miles, featuring plazas, wooden structures, and more than 100 earth mounds crafted with deliberate care. The heart of Cahokia was Monk's Mound, a massive platform rising nearly 100 feet high and covering more ground than Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza. The calm narration focuses not on spectacle, but on the quiet determination it must have taken for Cahokia's people to carry baskets of soil, one after another, shaping a landscape that still holds its form centuries later. Life in Cahokia was dense, diverse, and complex. Archaeologists believe the city drew people from surrounding regions, creating a cultural blend far richer than many assume existed in pre-European North America. The city had neighborhoods, craft centers, marketplaces, and ceremonial zones. Large wooden structures known as wood hinges, circular arrangements of posts, suggest sophisticated astronomical knowledge, marking solstices and seasonal change. Beneath this calm, organized surface, however, lay hints of social hierarchy. Burial mounds reveal elites and possibly rulers whose positions were reinforced through ritual display. But unlike ancient Egypt or Rome, Cahokia did not leave behind inscriptions describing its royal line or mythic stories. Silence surrounds its leadership, creating a mysterious contrast between monumental architecture and the absence of recorded identity. The city's sudden growth was followed by an equally sudden decline. Around the year 1200 CE, roughly a century after its rise, Cahokia began to transform in ways that remained difficult to interpret. Some neighborhoods emptied. Construction slowed. The great plazas saw fewer gatherings. By 1350 CE, the city was largely abandoned. The question hangs quietly in the nighttime air. How could the largest city in North America simply unravel and disappear? A number of theories have been proposed, and the calm pacing allows each to unfold gently, without rushing towards certainty. One explanation centers on environmental stress. Cahokia existed in a region where the Mississippi River and its tributaries regularly shifted channels, flooded, and reshaped the land. Evidence suggests that major floods occurred during the city's peak years, potentially damaging farmland and disrupting daily life. Soil analysis reveals that intensive farming, especially the widespread cultivation of maize, may have strained local resources. In a place where the population likely exceeded 20,000 at its height, even small ecological changes could ripple outward, destabilizing the fragile balance between people and environment. Another theory points to climate. Between 1100 and 1300 CE, the region transitioned into what scientists call the Little Ice Age. Cooler temperatures and unpredictable weather patterns could have shortened growing seasons, leading to crop shortfalls. For a city reliant on agricultural surplus to support elites, craftsmen, and non-farming specialists, repeated shortages could have quietly eroded social cohesion. Cahokia also appears to have experienced internal tension. Some excavated areas show signs of fortifications, wooden palisades built around key parts of the city. These defensive structures hint at conflict, whether from external groups or internal unrest. Yet, the mystery remains. Who were the enemies, if any? No clear evidence of large-scale warfare has been found. The palisades might have been symbolic displays of power rather than protective walls. Or they may have been built in response to a threat now lost to memory. Social complexity itself might have contributed to the decline. A city as large as Cahokia required leadership, organization, and a cohesive belief system. If political struggles, ritual disputes, or changes in leadership norms occurred, they could have shaken the city's foundations. Without written records, we can only imagine the conversations around council fires, the whispers in plazas, or the disagreements behind closed doors that may have weakened cohesion over time. Trade patterns could also have shifted. Cahokia's economy was interwoven with distant regions, from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast. Materials like copper, shell beads, mica, and volcanic glass made their way into Cahokia's workshops. If long-distance trade declined due to environmental changes or shifting alliances, the city might have lost some of its vitality. Civilizations built on networks often falter when those networks weaken. Yet the most poetic explanation, and one that aligns with the calm nighttime tone of the documentary, involves migration and transformation. The people of Cahokia may not have vanished in a dramatic sense. Instead, they may have dispersed into smaller communities across the Mississippi Valley. Cultures rarely disappear suddenly. They evolve. The descendants of Cahokia likely blended into emerging indigenous groups, carrying pieces of Cahokia knowledge, stories, and traditions with them. Over generations, the identity of Cahokia, the city, faded, while its people continued in new forms. This kind of disappearance is more like gentle erosion than collapse, a slow blending rather than an abrupt end. The archaeological silence deepens the sense of mystery. Excavations reveal pottery, tools, food remains, and ritual objects, but almost nothing that explains why people left. No mass graves suggesting sudden tragedy. No signs of widespread fire or war. No dramatic destruction layer common in many ancient collapse sites. Cahokia seems to have simply thinned out, its residents drifting away until only the earth mounds remained. The narration invites the listener to picture the moment the city began to empty. The sound of footsteps fading on wooden walkways, marketplaces falling quiet, smoke rising from fewer hearths each evening. Imagine the final residents walking through vast plazas that once held thousands, now echoing with wind. The city that once controlled the rhythm of life for an entire region eventually became a ghost of itself, grand yet desolate, intricate yet mute. Today, Cahokia stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, yet most people outside North America have never heard of it. The contrast is striking. A city larger than medieval London, built by people with engineering skills and astronomical understanding, now nearly forgotten by the modern world. Its mounds rise gently from grassy fields, offering no clear answers, only a soft reminder of human ambition and the fleeting nature of civilizations. As the section closes, the narration guides the listener toward the next civilization on our journey, one even older, even more sophisticated, and even more mysterious. From the river mounds of North America, the path leads quietly across continents to the meticulously planned cities and undeciphered relics of the Indus Valley, whose sudden decline echoes yet another chapter of humanity's forgotten stories. The Indus Valley civilization emerges in history like a calm, disciplined breath, measured, organized, and astonishingly advanced for its time. Flourishing more than 4,000 years ago across what is now Pakistan and northwest India, It stood alongside Egypt and Mesopotamia as one of the world's earliest great civilizations. Yet unlike those societies, whose rulers and legends echo through time, the Indus people left behind no readable texts, no heroic epics, no king lists. What survives instead is the quiet precision of their cities, straight roads meeting at perfect angles, carefully designed drainage systems, standardized bricks, and sprawling urban layouts that suggest a highly structured, remarkably stable way of life. This section gently guides the listener into that ancient world, with a hum of daily activity once filled orderly streets, but now lingers only in ruins and shards of pottery. The two largest cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, were marvels of urban planning. Mohenjo-daro, in particular, reveals a civilization deeply concerned with control, cleanliness, and structure. Homes featured bathrooms, wastewater drains ran beneath streets, and entire districts were arranged in ways that seemed thoroughly modern. Listeners are encouraged to picture the quiet sophistication of these ancient neighborhoods. Courtyards open to blue sky, baked brick walls warmed by sunlight, and water flowing through engineered channels that were centuries ahead of their time. No sprawling palaces dominate the skyline. No towering statues proclaim the power of rulers. The Indus Valley people appear to have created a society where urban life was orderly and communal rather than centered around kings or monumental temples. This absence of ostentatious power is one of the great mysteries. Most early civilizations documented their rulers in stone, celebrated their gods with massive structures, and left inscriptions filled with political and religious symbolism. The Indus Valley offers none of this. Their script, engraved on seals, pottery, amulets, and tablets, remains undeciphered. It consists of short sequences, often fewer than 10 characters, leaving scholars unsure whether it represents a full written language or something more symbolic. Because of this silence, we do not know the names of their rulers, the structure of their government, or the stories they told by firelight. The contrast between their architectural clarity and their historical opacity creates a calm but haunting sense of distance, like hearing footsteps but never seeing who made them. As we move deeper into the narrative, the focus shifts to the everyday life of these people. The Indus Valley civilization relied on agriculture, supported by the fertile plains of the Indus River and its tributaries. Farmers cultivated wheat, barley, peas, dates, and possibly early forms of rice. Trade networks stretched widely. Copper from Oman, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and other goods suggest a civilization interconnected with distant regions. Craftsmen produced beautiful beads, pottery, and figurines, each revealing a people who valued aesthetics alongside functionality. Their standardized weights and measures point to a society that prized order, consistency, and fairness in trade. It was a calm civilization, not built on conquest, but on rhythm, routine, and quiet mastery. And yet, around 1800 BCE, this sophisticated world began to unravel. The decline of the Indus Valley civilization is one of history's most enigmatic vanishing acts. Unlike other ancient collapses marked by destruction layers, invading armies, or widespread fires, the Indus cities appear to have declined gradually, almost gently, before being abandoned. There are no clear signs of mass violence, no dramatic evidence of war, no undeniable catastrophe in the archaeological record. Instead, the cities seem to have slowly emptied, their people dispersing into smaller rural communities or migrating into new regions. The disappearance is so subtle, it resembles a civilization quietly exhaling and fading into the surrounding landscape. One major theory attributes the decline to environmental changes. The region's rivers, particularly the Ghaggar Hakra, and possibly the fabled Sarasvati River of ancient texts, may have changed course or dried up. If a major river shifted away from important cities, the consequences would have been profound. Rivers supported agriculture, transportation, trade, and daily life. Losing one would disrupt everything. Imagine living in a city where the primary water source slowly dwindles. where fields yield less each season, where the ground cracks under persistent heat. The narration encourages listeners to imagine these subtle but devastating changes unfolding over generations, leading to quiet departure rather than sudden catastrophe. Another environmental factor involves climate. Evidence indicates that the region experienced a gradual shift toward aridity, a weakening of monsoon patterns that had once supported abundant agriculture. As rains became unpredictable, harvests would have faltered. A society built on precision and balance may not have adapted easily to such instability. Over decades, these pressures could have pushed people to migrate to areas with more reliable water sources. A second broad theory revolves around tectonic activity. Geological evidence suggests that earthquakes may have altered river courses, damaged structures, and disrupted urban life. Even without collapsing buildings, repeated seismic events could have weakened infrastructure and made large cities difficult to maintain. Yet another possibility involves changes in trade. The Indus Valley civilization maintained active commerce with Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf. As Mesopotamia experienced its own fluctuations, wars, regime changes, and shifting trade priorities, Indus merchants may have lost vital economic connections. A reduction in trade would have undermined the prosperity that supported craft specialization and urban density. The city system may have become financially unsustainable. Still, perhaps the most intriguing theory involves social transformation. It is possible that the people simply changed their way of life. Urban centers might have become less appealing as economic and environmental conditions shifted. Rural villages offered more flexibility, more space, and more resilience in times of instability. Without kings or monumental religious institutions binding them to cities, the Indus people may have found it easier to disperse, blending into new cultural landscapes. Over generations, this shift could have been so smooth that the collapse appeared, in retrospect, sudden. The calm narration acknowledges that no single theory fully explains the disappearance. Instead, it may have been a combination, a slow, multi-layered unraveling where ecological pressures, economic changes, and social evolution combined into a tipping point. The civilization's strengths, its organization, its reliance on stable systems, its communal planning, may have become vulnerabilities when the environment changed. A society built on balance struggles when that balance breaks. As we consider the archaeological silence that follows the decline, the mystery deepens. The cities were not violently destroyed. They were simply left behind. Mohenjo-Daro's once busy streets filled with dust. Perfectly aligned drains clogged and dried. The Great Bath, an iconic structure used perhaps for ritual purification, fell still and empty. Listeners are encouraged to visualize these spaces transformed by quiet abandonment. Grass creeping over brick platforms, empty courtyards echoing with wind, and pottery shards lying undisturbed for centuries. Today, the Indus Valley civilization remains one of the world's most captivating mysteries. Its ruins speak of intelligence, discipline, and harmony, yet its disappearance offers no clear answers. The contrast between what we know, its urban brilliance, and what we cannot recover, its language, leaders, beliefs, creates a lingering sense of wonder. As this section closes, the narration gently invites the listener to follow the path of ancient trade and migration toward the wider world. The next civilization on our journey is very different. Not a society of quiet planners, but a mysterious force that erupted in a history with thunder and then vanished back into shadow. The Sea Peoples, fleeting, powerful, and enigmatic, await just beyond the horizon. The Sea Peoples move through the ancient record like a sudden storm, loud, destructive, and then gone so completely that historians are still unsure who they were or where they came from. Their appearance around the 13th and 12th centuries BCE coincides with one of the most dramatic turning points in human history, the Bronze Age collapse. Yet these fierce maritime raiders left behind almost nothing in their own voice. No written language, no stone monuments, no city ruins confidently attributed to them. What we have instead are echoes, fragments from Egyptian inscriptions, traces from toppled kingdoms, and ruins of coastal cities burned in their wake. This section invites the listener to drift into that turbulent era with a calm, contemplative tone, exploring how a people capable of shaking civilizations could vanish so thoroughly that even their name remains uncertain. The story begins in the Late Bronze Age, a time when powerful empires dominated the eastern Mediterranean. The Hittites ruled Anatolia. Mycenaean Greeks controlled the Aegean. The Egyptians expanded into the Levant, and the city-states of Canaan and Syria thrived through trade. The world was interconnected. Goods, ideas, and people moved across seas and land routes that formed one of history's earliest global systems. Yet around 1200 BCE, this world faltered. Kingdoms fell, cities burned, and long-standing political structures crumbled. Many causes have been proposed: climate change, internal rebellions, shifting trade networks. But the sudden arrival of the Sea Peoples stands at the center of the chaos. The Sea Peoples enter history primarily through Egyptian records, especially the inscriptions of Pharaoh Ramesses III. These inscriptions describe them as a confederation of tribes arriving from the midst of the sea, traveling with families in carts and ships, attacking both land and coastal regions. Their assaults were widespread enough that multiple ancient powers mentioned their destructive sweep. The calm narration acknowledges that the darkness surrounding their identity is part of their enduring mystique. They seem to emerge from nowhere, as if pushed by unseen forces across the Mediterranean, and their movements reshaped the political landscape of the entire region. Archaeological evidence suggests that many coastal cities, from Anatolia to the Levant, were burned, abandoned, or dramatically altered during this period. The Mycenaean palace system in Greece collapsed, the great Hittite empire fell, and numerous smaller kingdoms disappeared entirely. Yet this was not a simple story of invaders conquering everyone in their path. The collapse seems more like a chain reaction, each kingdom's fall weakening another, each disruption creating space for further instability. The Sea Peoples may have been both cause and consequence, both aggressors and refugees, both destroyers and survivors fleeing their own crises. Who were they? This question lingers softly in the air, unanswered but essential. Scholars have proposed many identities. Perhaps they were displaced groups from the Aegean, Mycenaean survivors escaping internal collapse. Perhaps they were populations from Western Anatolia, pressured by climate shifts or political upheaval. Others suggest they were a mix of people from Sicily, Sardinia, Cyprus, and various parts of the Mediterranean drawn together by shared suffering and opportunity. The inscriptions list names like the Shurdin, Shikalesh, Peleset, Tjeker, Dinyen, and others, names that may hint at different origins but whose meanings remain contested. The calm tone invites listeners to imagine them as a drifting constellation of cultures, united not by origin, but by movement. One of the most interesting possibilities is that the Peleset, one group within the Sea Peoples, eventually settled along the southern coast of Canaan and became the people the Bible later refers to as the Philistines. If true, then part of the Sea Peoples did not vanish but transformed, absorbing and blending into the local culture. Yet this is only one thread in a tapestry still largely hidden. For other groups, the archaeological trail grows cold quickly, suggesting that the Sea Peoples' identity dissolved even as their impact reshaped nations. The narration brings listeners into the Egyptian perspective. For Ramesses III, the Sea Peoples were an existential threat. His inscriptions say they came in a sweeping wave, attacking by land and sea. He describes their ships crowding the Nile Delta, families traveling with them, and warriors prepared for conquest. Egyptian art depicts chaotic naval battles, boats colliding, arrows flying, spears thrust from deck to deck. Yet despite the intensity of these scenes, Egypt survived. Ramesses III defeated the invasions and claimed victory, but even Egypt entered a period of gradual decline afterward. That a civilization as strong as Egypt felt the shock of the Sea Peoples emphasizes how disruptive they truly were. After their defeat in Egypt, The sea peoples seemed to disperse like mist. Some settled, some merged with local populations. Others may have returned to the sea, seeking new lands, or simply disappearing from the written record. What is striking is that the civilizations they destabilized did not recover quickly. The Mediterranean world entered what scholars call the Greek Dark Age. Centuries of reduced population, simplified lifestyles, and the loss of writing systems like Linear B. Trade networks shrank, craftsmanship declined, and many regions returned to smaller, isolated communities. It is in this contrast that the Sea People's mystery deepens. They were powerful enough to topple empires, but left no lasting structure of their own. They shook the world, but did not stay to remake it. Their disappearance is as sudden as their arrival, leaving behind burned ruins, changed cultures, and a long silence. The calm narration emphasizes this ephemeral nature. Like a storm at sea, they crashed upon the shore and receded, leaving only the memory of their force. Modern archaeological research adds complexity. Signs of famine, drought, and resource shortages appear across the region at the same time. Tree-ring studies show prolonged droughts. Excavations reveal fortifications built hastily, as if in fear of attack. It is possible that many societies were already weakened by climate stress, making them vulnerable to raids or migrations. The Sea Peoples may not have been a single coherent enemy, but rather the most visible symptom of a system already in crisis. They were the spark, but also the smoke, the wave, and perhaps even refugees of the same disaster they worsened. The narration gently guides listeners toward a meditative understanding. The Sea Peoples represent disruption in its purest form, not merely warlike invaders, but a symbol of how fragile interconnected systems can be. When trade falters, when crops fail, when populations move, even the strongest civilizations can collapse suddenly and unevenly. The Sea Peoples were the agents of a historical turning point, and then they became one of its deepest mysteries. And so, as the section draws to its close, the listener is invited to imagine the last echoes of these enigmatic groups fading into the Mediterranean wind. Their ships, once symbols of terror and upheaval, are now only silhouettes in our imagination. Their voices, once powerful enough to alter nations, have vanished entirely. The calm fades into a soft transition, guiding the viewer toward the next civilization, one built not on conquest, but on astonishing stonework and island engineering. A place equally mysterious, equally impressive, and equally abandoned. The megalithic wonder of Nan Madol awaits in the next chapter. Nan Madol rises from the ocean like a dream half-remembered, solid yet surreal, ancient yet still whispering with unanswered questions. Set on the eastern shore of Pohnpei in Micronesia, this city of basalt columns and tidal canals has long been called the Venice of the Pacific, though its architecture is unlike anything else on Earth. Massive prismatic stones, some weighing several tons, are stacked with careful precision to form walls, platforms, tombs, and ceremonial spaces. Yet Nan Madol sits not on land, but across a network of over 90 tiny man-made islets, all built atop coral reefs. The effect is unearthly, as though a civilization once decided to create a kingdom that floated between sea and sky, and then vanished, leaving only its silent geometry behind. This section immerses the listener in its calm, watery mystery, a place where history and legend drift together like currents. The first puzzle of Nan Madol lies in its construction. The basalt used for its buildings does not originate on the tiny islets themselves. Instead, it had to be quarried from elsewhere on the island and transported across uneven ground and dangerous tidal zones. How ancient builders moved such immense stone columns remains an unanswered question. Some theories suggest they rolled them on logs. Others propose rafts. Still others believe the stones were dragged with ropes and manpower. Yet the basalt's shape, naturally hexagonal or octagonal pillars, adds to the otherworldly impression. They look like deliberate beams, almost like oversized logs carved from stone. Calm narration invites the listener to picture workers hundreds of years ago arranging these columns into layers, interlocking them like a lattice to create strong, stable walls rising from unpredictable waters. Dates for Nan Madol's construction are still debated, but many archaeologists agree the earliest parts of the site could date back as far as the 8th or 9th century CE, while its full ceremonial city likely flourished between the 12th and 16th centuries. During this time, it served as the political and religious center of the Sotalur dynasty, a ruling family whose origins are shrouded in myth. According to local legends, the first rulers were either giants or magicians, capable of levitating stones into place. These stories echo softly through the island's oral history, adding a layer of mystical charm to the site's already strange engineering. The alignment of certain structures and the intentional shaping of the canals hint at sophisticated planning, suggesting Nan Madol was not simply a city, but a carefully designed realm of ritual and power. Life in Nan Madol was not ordinary urban living. The city was deliberately separated from the rest of Phnom Penh, both physically and symbolically. The Sotalur rulers required nobles, priests, and select groups to live within the stone walls, creating a center of elite control. The canals acted like natural boundaries, and tides moving between structures created a tranquil yet controlled environment. The sound of water flowing through narrow channels would have been constant, creating a serene but enclosed atmosphere. Listeners can imagine the quiet, rhythmic soundscape, lapping water, echoing footsteps on stone platforms, and the distant calls of island birds. It was a city meant to awe, to isolate, and to enforce the ruler's authority. Yet the Sotalur dynasty, for all its power, eventually fell. Oral traditions describe their rule as increasingly oppressive, with excessive demands placed on the island's population. Over time, resentment grew. The introduction of a foreign conqueror named Isoklikal, a figure part historical, part legendary, marked the dynasty's downfall. He led a rebellion that ended Sotalur rule and restored freedom to Phnom Penh's people. After this upheaval, Nan Madol was gradually abandoned. Without its ruling class and centralized power, the city's purpose faded, and maintaining it became too demanding. The sea began reclaiming what had once been carefully built, creeping through its canals and around its walls, slowly softening the edges of the once mighty kingdom. Today, Nan Madol is a place of haunting tranquility. Its stone structures still stand, but many are partially submerged or overgrown with mangroves. Root systems twist through ancient basalt, intertwining nature with architecture and creating the impression of a city being absorbed back into the earth. In places where water once flowed freely, sediment has settled, forming quiet pools. The calm narration encourages listeners to imagine walking through these ruins at twilight, hearing only the gentle shifting of water against stone and the rustle of leaves overhead. Every corner feels sacred, every shadow filled with the presence of history, both seen and unseen. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Nan Madol is its apparent lack of practical infrastructure for supporting large populations. There is no evidence of elaborate water collection systems or farmland within the complex. Everything, food, fresh water, daily necessities, had to be transported from the main island. This suggests Nan Madol functioned more as a ceremonial or administrative center rather than a true metropolis. It was a place of rulers, rituals, and symbolic power, not a bustling urban hub. This contrast between its monumental scale and its logistical fragility adds to its enigmatic charm. How could such a heavy, labor-intensive project be sustained in such an impractical location? Scholars continue to debate the reasons behind the city's abandonment. Was it the collapse of the Sotalur's political power, environmental pressures, rising sea levels, changes in local culture or economy? No single explanation fully satisfies. Instead, the mystery lies in the overlap of all these factors. The calm tone of the section suggests that Nan Madol may be a reminder of how even the grandest expressions of human ambition can be vulnerable to nature time, and shifting societal currents. Its disappearance was not dramatic or sudden like some lost civilizations. It was slow, quiet, and gentle, more like a candle fading than a flame extinguished. The legends surrounding Ninmatl blur the boundary between history and myth. Some stories claim sorcerers used magical flying dragons to place the stones. Others speak of spirits inhabiting the canals, protecting the site from outsiders. These tales survive alongside archaeological evidence, forming a dual narrative that enriches Ninmatl's allure. It is a place where explanation never fully eclipses imagination, and where myth fills in the spaces that history cannot. As this section draws to a close, the narration dwells on the image of Ninmatl as a serene ghost city, one that did not vanish violently but slipped quietly out of the present, leaving behind a stone labyrinth floating on a calm sea. Its canals glimmer in the moonlight, its walls stand resilient but weathered, and its story continues to echo through time. The transition shifts smoothly toward the next civilization, focusing on another society that disappeared, not into the ocean, but across vast arid plains. The listener is gently guided from the watery silence of Micronesia to the dusty mystery of the Indus Valley, where an ancient urban world once thrived and then faded just as quietly. The Indus Valley civilization stands as one of humanity's earliest great urban cultures, yet remains the quietest of them all. Quiet in the sense that it left behind no deciphered texts, no grand declarations, no clear explanations for its rise or its sudden fading. Flourishing between 2600 and 1900 BCE across what is now Pakistan and northwest India, it was contemporary with Egypt and Mesopotamia, yet profoundly different. Where other ancient civilizations carved kings' names into stone, built towering monuments, and left behind records of conquests, the Indus people lived in cities remarkable for planning, cleanliness, and order. Their world seems calm, deliberate, and harmoniously designed. And then, almost without warning, their cities emptied, their streets fell silent, and the civilization dissolved into smaller rural communities. This section invites the listener to drift into the soft mystery of a culture that shaped early human history, but vanished without a dramatic battlefield or a legendary catastrophe, only an enduring question mark. The heart of the Indus Valley civilization was its extraordinary urban planning. Cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa were laid out on grid patterns centuries before such precision appeared elsewhere. Streets intersected at right angles. Neighborhoods were organized with clarity, and even multi-story homes existed long before they became common elsewhere. Their drainage systems were astonishing. Covered sewers ran alongside every major street, and nearly every home had its own bath or wash area connected directly to the drainage network. This level of public hygiene was unmatched in the ancient world and would not reappear on such a scale until Roman times. The calm narration draws attention to how soothingly modern their cities feel, almost as though the Indus people valued everyday comfort over monumental display. Yet despite their architectural sophistication, the Indus left behind no grand palaces, no sprawling temples, no obvious symbols of kingship. There is no proof of a ruling elite living in elevated luxury. Instead, their structures suggest an unusually egalitarian society, one where power may have been shared or expressed in ways we still don't understand. This contrast, highly organized cities without clear rulers, adds to the mystery. It invites listeners to imagine a civilization governed more by community agreement than by monarchs or priests. Or perhaps the authority they recognized left no trace that modern archaeology can clearly interpret. One of the most intriguing enigmas is the Indus script. Hundreds of tiny seals and pottery shards display symbols that likely represent a writing system, yet no one has successfully deciphered it. The inscriptions are short, often only a few characters long, and the language behind them is unknown. Without bilingual texts or longer documents, the script remains locked. This silence of written records leaves us without access to their thoughts, their administration, their beliefs, and their stories. It is a civilization that whispers through artifacts but never speaks in full sentences, creating a serene but haunting atmosphere across its vast archaeological sites. Trade played a major role in Indus life. Their cities produced fine jewelry, pottery, beads, and textiles that traveled far across ancient trade networks. Indus seals have been found in Mesopotamian cities, indicating long-distance exchange. They shipped goods by boat, along rivers, and through coastal ports, suggesting a prosperity rooted in connectivity. Their standardized weights and measures point to a controlled economic system, one that ensured fairness and consistency. This orderliness contrasts with many contemporary societies, which fluctuated through wars and political upheavals. The Indus Valley appears calm and stable, a civilization that valued balance. Yet beneath this calm surface lies the great mystery. Why did it all end? Around 1900 BCE, signs of decline begin to appear. Cities were gradually abandoned. Trade networks broke down. The careful urban planning gave way to smaller settlements with simpler structures. Some neighborhoods were deserted, and the advanced drainage system fell out of use. But the change was not sudden or violent. There is little evidence of warfare, invasion, or destruction. Instead, it was a slow, quiet departure, as though the people simply drifted away from the urban centers and returned to rural life. A major theory points to environmental change. Geological studies suggest the region's major rivers, especially the Ghaggar-Hakra, often associated with the legendary Sarasvati River, shifted course or dried up. Without reliable water sources, agriculture would have faltered. Another possibility is a prolonged drought affecting the entire region, reducing crop yields and forcing people to disperse. There is also speculation about tectonic activity altering river patterns. Whatever the cause, environmental stress seems to have played a significant role. Listeners can imagine the gradual drying of fields, the shrinking of riverbanks, and the slow erosion of a once thriving system. Another theory involves disease, perhaps a widespread epidemic that weakened the population. Yet no clear evidence confirms this. Still others believe internal social changes may have fractured the unified culture. But the truth remains elusive, and the absence of deciphered writing leaves us without the civilization's own explanation. The calm narration embraces this uncertainty, noting that sometimes the most peaceful societies leave behind the most peaceful mysteries. No dramatic endings, only transitions softened by time. Mohenjo-Daro, one of the civilization's largest cities, provides some of the most haunting imagery. Excavations reveal entire streets perfectly preserved, rows of houses, public baths, wells, market areas, all arranged with care. But these streets are empty. Tools and everyday objects remain, as if people left without urgency. The Great Bath, an impressive public water structure, still stands, filled by imagination rather than water. The city's silence feels almost intentional, as though it was abandoned with dignity, not chaos. The priest-king statue, often associated with the Indus Valley, provides another point of contemplation. A calm, bearded figure wearing a patterned robe, his expression serene and thoughtful. Though he may not have been a king or a priest, he represents the civilization's quiet poise. He seems to embody the culture's essence, measured, peaceful, introspective, and structured. A portrait of a people whose greatest legacy may be their harmony. As centuries passed, the descendants of the Indus people blended into later South Asian cultures, carrying fragments of their heritage forward. Their language, traditions, and ideas may have lived on in ways we cannot fully trace. The civilization itself did not disappear completely. Rather, its centralized form dissolved into smaller societies that continued to evolve. It was not the end of a people, only the end of a great urban experiment. The section closes with a meditative reflection. The Indus Valley civilization is a reminder that not all collapses are catastrophes. Some are gentle withdrawals, societies adapting quietly to change. Their cities may be ruins now, but the serenity of their story lingers. Their calm order, their mysterious script, their perfect planning, all remain a puzzle wrapped in silence. As we leave the Indus plains behind, the documentary transitions smoothly toward a very different kind of disappearance, one involving technology, warfare, and sudden destruction. The next section leads listeners to the vanished desert kingdom of the Nabateans, masters of stone and trade, whose oasis cities once shone brightly and then dimmed into history's shadows. The Nabateans occupy a unique place among ancient civilizations, neither fully lost nor fully understood, known for a single breathtaking city, yet mysterious in nearly every other aspect. Flourishing between the 4th century BCE and the 2nd century CE, they carved their lives into the rose-red cliffs of the Jordanian desert. Their capital, Petra, feels like a mirage brought to life. Towering facades hewn from sandstone, hidden valleys, and winding passages that lead to ceremonial tombs and forgotten homes. The Nabateans were master builders, skilled traders, and diplomatic survivors in a harsh, shifting landscape. And yet, despite their brilliance, their civilization gradually dissolved into the sands, leaving behind art, architecture, and unanswered questions. This section gently guides listeners into their world, a place where stone whispers and the desert keeps secrets. The Nabateans were originally nomadic Arab tribes who understood the desert intimately. Instead of relying on fertile lands or rivers, they mastered scarcity. They knew where water hid beneath dry earth, how to navigate shifting dunes, and how to survive long stretches of inhospitable terrain. Over time, they turned these skills into an extraordinary advantage. As neighboring empires grew obsessed with trade, spices, incense, silk, the Nabateans became the essential intermediaries, guiding caravans across deserts other civilizations feared. Caravans carrying frankincense from Arabia, pepper from India, and rare textiles from the East all passed through Nabatean hands. Their knowledge of secret routes and hidden water sources made them indispensable and wealthy. This wealth allowed them to transition from nomads to sophisticated urban builders. Petra, their crown jewel, was not just a city, but a sanctuary carved into sandstone cliffs. The contrast of its monumental stone architecture with the emptiness of the desert creates a dreamlike, almost impossible scene. The most famous structure, Al-Khazna, the treasury, rises from the rock like a giant sculpture, its columns and statues blending Greek, Egyptian, and local artistic elements. It was not truly a treasury, but likely a royal tomb, a monument to both death and prestige. The calm narration invites the listener to picture walking through the narrow gorge that opens suddenly into this breathtaking facade. The moment of emergence feels like stepping into a world where myth and memory blur. One of the Nabateans' most impressive accomplishments was their water engineering. In a region defined by dryness, they created an elaborate system of dams, cisterns, and channels that captured every drop of rainfall. Their water system was so advanced that Petra could support tens of thousands of people, lush gardens, and pools even in times of drought. This mastery over water gave them not only survival, but also power. It allowed them to build monuments, support large populations, and maintain thriving trade operations. Such ingenuity explains how a desert tribe transformed into a wealthy kingdom without relying on fertile agricultural land. Culturally, the Nabateans were a blend of influences. They traded with Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, Persians, and Arabian tribes, and these exchanges shaped their art, religion, and architecture. Their tombs display Hellenistic columns, yet retain indigenous Arabian symbolism. Their inscriptions mix languages. Their deities included Al-Uzza, Dushra, and others who reflect a merging of local and imported traditions. This fluid identity makes them difficult to categorize. They were neither fully Arab nor Greek nor Roman, but something unique, a hybrid culture shaped by openness and mobility. Their capital reflects this blend, a place where caravans from distant lands gathered, exchanged stories, and rested within the cool shadow of stone canyons. Despite their trading success, the Nabateans maintained a reputation for secrecy. They rarely wrote down their knowledge. Their water technologies, trade routes, and political strategies were transmitted quietly, often orally. Even their script, related to early Arabic, was rarely used for long texts. Because of this, modern historians know surprisingly little about how they governed themselves, what their internal society looked like, or how their culture functioned on a day-to-day level. They left behind magnificent buildings, but very few words. This silence has contributed to their air of mystery, a civilization whose stones speak louder than its records. The turning point in their story came with Rome's expansion. For centuries, the Nabateans maintained peaceful relations with Rome, paying taxes, cooperating in trade, and negotiating diplomatically. But in the early 2nd century CE, after the death of the last Nabatean king, Rabel II, Rome annexed the kingdom and turned it into a province named Arabia Petrea. Unlike some conquests, this transition was not marked by heavy destruction or dramatic battles. Instead, it was quiet, almost too quiet. The Nabateans simply faded into the Roman system, their culture blending into the broader empire over several generations. But the annexation was only one factor in their disappearance. As Roman trade routes shifted away from old overland caravan paths and towards safer maritime routes, Petra's importance waned. The city's lifeblood, the movement of goods, slowed. Without trade to sustain it, Petra gradually declined. Earthquakes damaged its structures. Water systems, once meticulously maintained, began to fail. The population dwindled. Eventually, Petra became a shadow of its former self, a ghost city tucked inside rugged mountains. What makes the Nabateans' disappearance especially striking is that it was not caused by war, famine, or rebellion. It was a gentle erosion, a slow blending into other cultures, a quiet surrender to shifting economic currents. Of all the lost civilizations, theirs is perhaps the most peaceful vanishing. A kingdom built on secrets simply slipped into silence, leaving behind carved facades that still glow in the sun's golden light. Yet, even in disappearance, the Nabateans left their mark. Their language influenced early Arabic scripts. Their trade networks helped shape the economic foundations of the ancient Near East, and their stone architecture continues to inspire awe centuries later. Petra remained hidden from the Western world until 1812, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt dressed as a Bedouin and rediscovered it. Even then, the city's origins felt enigmatic, its monuments too perfect to belong to a forgotten culture. Since then, archaeologists have uncovered more Nabatean sites across Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, revealing a civilization more widespread and sophisticated than once believed. Still, many mysteries persist. How exactly did they move such massive stones? What was the full extent of their water network? How did their governance function? What caused the final decline of other Nabatean cities beyond Petra? These questions linger with a soft echo, the way desert winds hum through Petra's hollow corridors. As this section reaches its end, the narration settles into a tranquil reflection. The Nabateans remind us that not all lost civilizations end in fire. Some fade like footprints in sand, gradually, gracefully, and without resistance. From their stone-carved facades to their desert expertise, their legacy remains an elegant blend of resilience and mystery. With this gentle fade, the documentary transitions toward the next vanished people, those who built their world among dense forests and towering mountains, who mastered their environment yet met a dramatic, haunting end. The next chapter leads us into the shadowed realm of the mysterious Chachapoya, the cloud warriors of the Andes. High in the cloud forests of the Peruvian Andes lived the Chachapoya, a civilization so intertwined with mist, mountains, and mystery that even the Inca called them the people of the clouds. Their world existed on ridges and cliffs wrapped in fog, where green moss draped ancient stones and where sunlight arrived in soft, filtered beams. The Chachapoya built their settlements, so high above the valleys that they seemed suspended between earth and sky. And just as their homes were perched in the clouds, their history feels similarly distant, visible in fragments, yet impossible to grasp completely. This section invites the listener into their ethereal realm, a place where cliffs whisper stories, forests cradle ruins, and the past dissolves into mist. The Chachapoya culture flourished long before the Inca Empire, establishing itself in some of the most difficult terrain imaginable. Dense cloud forests, steep mountainsides, and deep ravines surrounded them. Yet instead of being deterred, they turned this rugged environment into a fortress of identity and survival. Their settlements sit on ridge tops like stone crowns, circular houses with carved lintels, plazas overlooking endless green canyons, and walls decorated with zigzag and rhombus patterns. Everything they built seems designed to honor both practicality and beauty. The calm narration invites listeners to imagine waking up in a stone house encircled by clouds, looking out at a world that feels lifted far above the ordinary. One of their greatest achievements is the Fortress of Quilap, often called the Machu Picchu of the North, though it predates the Inca and stands on its own unique merits. Quilap is an immense walled city atop a mountain ridge, enclosed by 20-meter-high walls built from massive limestone blocks. Yet inside these intimidating defenses, the city feels gentle, filled with circular homes, storage buildings, and sanctuaries. Some structures feature friezes of stylized eyes and geometric patterns, symbols whose meanings are still debated. The contrast between Quilap's defensive exterior and its peaceful interior mirrors the dual nature of the Chachapoya people as described by chroniclers. Fierce in battle, yet harmonious in daily life. The Chachapoya's relationship with death adds another layer of mystery. Unlike other Andean cultures that buried their dead underground or in large ceremonial centers, the Chachapoya placed mummies in cliffside sarcophagi. These sarcophagi, known as the Purunmaku, stand like sentinels along sheer rock faces, watching over valleys from impossible ledges. The figures have human-like shapes, painted faces, and protective symbols. They look like guardians protecting the threshold between the living and the dead. The calm narrator invites listeners to picture these lone figures perched high above the forest, surrounded by drifting mists, their silent vigil unbroken for centuries. In addition to the sarcophagi, the Chachapoya also used mausoleum complexes such as revash, clusters of miniature, house-like tombs painted in red and white, built directly into towering cliffs. These places show a belief system deeply connected to the mountains and the sky. By resting their dead in lofty places, the Chachapoya may have believed they were sending them closer to the spirit world above. Or perhaps the cliffs were protective barriers, keeping ancestors safe from enemies and natural threats. Either way, their funerary practices give their culture a haunting, ethereal quality that distinguishes them from their neighbors. Much of what we know about the Chachapoya comes from Inca and Spanish accounts, because the Chachapoya left no written language. The Inca described them as tall, fair-skinned, and exceptionally skilled warriors. Though such descriptions are debated and must be taken cautiously. What is clear is that the Chachapoya resisted Inca expansion fiercely. Their mountain strongholds and intimate knowledge of the terrain made them difficult to conquer. Yet, despite their resistance, the Inca eventually subdued them in the 15th century, incorporating them into the empire through relocation, military service, and forced assimilation. Ironically, it was the arrival of the Spanish, not the Inca, that triggered one of the most devastating periods for the Chachapoya people. Many Chachapoyas initially allied with the Spanish against the Inca, hoping to reclaim autonomy. But epidemics introduced by Europeans, smallpox, measles, and other diseases, swept through the population with brutal efficiency. Entire communities vanished. Cliff tombs were left abandoned. Forests reclaimed villages. It was less a single moment of collapse and more a dissolving over generations. A soft vanishing into the green shadows. Archaeologists exploring Chachapoya sites often describe the uncanny quietness of the ruins. Dense vegetation muffles sound. Mist drifts between stone walls. Parrots and insects provide the only background noise. Many settlements remain hidden, swallowed by foliage and revealed only when the forest briefly opens its curtain. This sense of discovery, arriving at a circular cluster of stone homes covered in moss, creates the impression of stepping into a forgotten world untouched by time. The calm narration lingers on this feeling, the sense that the Chachapoya did not disappear violently, but simply merged with the landscape, becoming part of the forest itself. The Chachapoya mystery deepens when archaeologists examine their material culture. They produced delicate textiles, pottery with intricate designs, and stone carvings reflecting geometric symbolism. Yet interpreting these symbols is difficult without written explanation. With the zigzags on collapsed walls representations of snakes, rivers, lightning, or something entirely symbolic and cultural? Each answer drifts just out of reach, like a shape glimpsed through fog. Environmental change may have played a role in their decline as well. Cloud forests are delicate ecosystems, and shifts in rainfall, erosion, or agricultural patterns could have affected Chachapoya settlements. Their terraced farmlands were sophisticated, but maintaining them required constant labor. As populations fell due to disease and war, these terraces may have been abandoned, triggering a slow unraveling of the infrastructure that supported their society. Yet the Chachapoya did not vanish completely. Their descendants still live in the region, blending into the broader Andean population, but preserving elements of their ancestry. Local legends, traditional practices, and regional identities carry echoes of the ancient cloud warriors. Their culture may have faded from the heights of Quilap, but their lineage persists in quieter, subtler ways. In modern times, the rediscovery and restoration of Chachapoya sites have renewed interest in their story. Quilap, Revash, Lambamba, and numerous smaller settlements reveal that the Chachapoya were not isolated mountain dwellers, but part of a complex network of communities spread across a vast region. Each new excavation adds a piece to the puzzle, yet the full picture remains elusive. Their disappearance feels less like a dramatic ending and more like a slow merging into the mist they called home. As this section draws to a close, the narration settles into a peaceful reflection. The Chachapoya remind us that some civilizations vanish not through sudden catastrophe, but by gently slipping into the background of time. Their stone circles, their cliffside tombs, and their cloud-wrapped cities remain quiet witnesses to a culture both present and absent, visible yet veiled, enduring yet fading. The transition flows softly into the next chapter, guiding listeners from misty mountains to a remote desert plateau, home to a civilization known for lines so vast they can only be seen from the sky. The mystery now shifts from cloud forests to open skies as we move toward the enigmatic creators of the Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines stretch across the parched desert plains of southern Peru, massive geoglyphs etched into the earth, visible only from the sky, yet created long before humans ever took to the air. These enormous shapes include animals, spirals, perfect geometric lines, and even humanoid figures. Some extend for kilometers with astonishing precision. From the ground, they appear as shallow grooves in pale desert soil. But from above, they reveal a grand and mysterious canvas, one that hints at a vanished worldview, a culture that communicated on a scale far beyond the ordinary. This section gently guides the listener into the quiet vastness of the Nazca Desert, where silence stretches across ancient artwork and where the purpose of these great lines remains both captivating and elusive. The Nazca civilization flourished between 200 BCE and 600 CE, long before the rise of the Inca Empire. They lived in one of the driest regions on Earth, an environment that rarely sees rain and where winds are soft enough that the geoglyphs have remained intact for over 1,000 years. The desert stability preserved their creations in a kind of natural museum, a giant open-air gallery where time barely touches the ground. The calm narration invites listeners to imagine this stark landscape, flat, silent, sun-bleached, and astonishingly still. Into this blank canvas, the Nazca people carved meaning, pattern, and mystery. One of the most extraordinary aspects of the Nazca lines is the precision with which they were made. Using simple tools, wooden stakes, ropes, and careful observation, they created straight lines extending across kilometers of terrain. They removed the dark, oxidized surface stones to reveal the lighter soil beneath, forming high-contrast lines that can still be seen in perfect clarity today. They also created enormous biomorphic figures: a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, a condor, a whale, a dog, even a long-armed humanoid known as the astronaut. Each figure is rendered with graceful curves and balanced proportions, suggesting a deep understanding of scale and design. Yet here lies the great contrast. Despite their breathtaking scale, these figures are nearly invisible from ground level. Standing inside one, a person sees only shallow grooves in rock. They can't perceive the whole picture. To truly see the designs, one must rise hundreds of meters into the air. And so, the mystery emerges: why create artwork that only the heavens could observe? The calm narration lingers on this question, inviting viewers to ponder the possibility that the Nazca lines were not meant for human eyes at all. Several theories attempt to explain the Nazca lines, each offering a different perspective on their creator's worldview. One hypothesis suggests they were religious or ceremonial pathways, ritual lines walked by priests, perhaps during processions meant to invoke deities associated with rain, fertility, or agriculture. This idea fits the region. In such an arid desert, water would have been the central focus of spiritual life. Indeed, many geoglyphs seem connected to underground water sources or aquifers, hinting at symbolic communication with the environment itself. Another theory considers astronomical alignments. Some researchers believe that the lines mark celestial events such as solstices, equinoxes, or the rising of specific constellations. Certain lines appear to point toward the horizon, where the sun rises on important days of the year. The animal figures might symbolize constellations or mythic beings linked to the sky. Yet the evidence is complex, and while some alignments seem intentional, others do not fit neatly into an astronomical model. The Nazca lines might represent a blend of earthly and celestial intentions, part calendar, part offering, part sacred art. A third explanation focuses on water. The Nazca people built sophisticated underground canals known as puquios, which brought water from aquifers to their dry fields. Some scholars propose that the lines mirror the structure of these puquios or mark places where underground water flows. The shapes of animals, such as the hummingbird, often linked to fertility and renewal, might symbolize prayers for water, life, and crop success. The desert, though harsh, was the heart of their world, and their art may have been a profound conversation with the land that sustained them. There are also more speculative theories, some suggesting the lines were signals to gods, others imagining they were landing guides for ancient visitors. While such ideas capture the imagination, they lack archaeological support. Still, the fact that these notions persist speaks to the deep wonder the Nazca lines inspire. Their silence allows room for both scientific inquiry and imaginative speculation, making them one of history's most haunting canvases. The Nazca themselves remain somewhat shadowed, known through pottery, textiles, remains, and the desert's preserved artifacts. Their ceramics are vibrant, painted with geometric shapes and stylized animals. Their textiles show skillful weaving and symbolic patterns. These artistic traditions connect closely with the geoglyphs, suggesting a unified visual culture. Yet despite this evidence, the Nazca left no written record, no codices, no explicit explanation of their beliefs. Their entire world is reconstructed from fragments of information, a puzzle with many missing pieces. Environmental factors may have played a role in their decline. Around 500 CE, major climate shifts affected the region. Flooding from El Niño events destroyed farmland, while prolonged droughts reduced crop yields. Combined with possible deforestation caused by overuse of natural resources, These pressures weakened the civilization. As the environment became unstable, so too did their society. Over time, the population dispersed, leaving the great desert drawings behind. Art still intact, but the artists long gone. Today, pilots, researchers, and tourists fly over the Nazca Desert in small aircraft, experiencing the breathtaking moment when the flat earth below suddenly reveals animal figures hundreds of meters long. It is a perspective the Nazca people themselves likely never saw. And yet, the designs persist, still speaking, still waiting, still enigmatic. Their sheer endurance suggests their creators understood the desert intimately. They knew that carving into the pale subsurface, protected by the region's almost total lack of rain, would preserve their work for millennia. Whether intended for humans, gods, or the earth itself, the lines were meant to last. The calm narration returns to the desert winds, the soundless plains, and the sense of an ancient message lingering just out of reach. The Nazca lines remind us that not all communication is meant to be read like a book. Some messages are symbolic, ritualistic, or experiential. Some are meant to be seen only from far above, as though only the sky, or whatever dwells in it, was the intended audience. As this section concludes, the transition gently moves toward the next mystery of the ancient world, one set not on open plains but in deep jungles. A civilization that built great cities of stone, flourished magnificently, and then declined in a wave of ecological and societal upheaval. The story now turns from desert drawings to a rainforest empire, setting the stage for the enigmatic Maya and their perplexing collapse. The Maya civilization rose from the dense rainforests of Mesoamerica like a living tapestry of stone, astronomy, and myth. Their cities, Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, Copan, were masterpieces of architecture and engineering, crowned with towering pyramids, carved stelae, and sprawling plazas. Yet beneath their monumental beauty lay something even more astonishing, a profound knowledge system that blended mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, and ritual life into a single, unified worldview. For centuries, the Maya thrived, their society pulsing with ceremonial rhythms, bustling markets, and astronomical observations that tracked celestial cycles with remarkable precision. And then, over the span of just a few generations, many of their cities fell silent. The jungle reclaimed the plazas, vines crept over temples, and the once luminous Maya world dimmed into mystery. The collapse of the classic Maya is not a single event, but a complex, multi-layered unraveling that took place between the 8th and 10th centuries CE. Unlike the Nazca lines, silent symbols on open desert plains, the Maya left behind an overwhelming abundance of texts, carvings, and art. Their hieroglyphic writing system recorded dynasties, battles, rituals, and cosmic cycles. Yet despite this wealth of information, the reason behind their abrupt decline remains one of the great enigmas of archaeology. The calm narration here moves slowly through their forested cities, inviting listeners to imagine the contrast. A civilization that achieved incredible intellectual heights, yet could not prevent a dramatic societal collapse. One of the most striking features of the Maya world was their relationship with the environment. The rainforests they call home were both generous and perilous. While they offered abundant resources, they also required careful, continuous management. The Maya transformed these forests into managed landscapes, creating agricultural systems such as terracing, raised fields, and engineered reservoirs. They understood seasonal rainfall cycles and built complex water storage networks to survive dry periods. But over time, population growth increased pressure on these systems. More trees were cut for construction, fuel, and farmland. Soil became exhausted. Water sources grew strained. When the balance between people and environment faltered, the consequences rippled through Maya society. Climate evidence suggests that during the centuries of decline, the region experienced severe droughts, repeated, prolonged, and devastating. These droughts would have undermined crop production, disrupted trade routes, and intensified competition between rival city-states. Warfare became more frequent, as cities fought for dwindling resources and prestige. Inscriptions from the late Classic period show an unusual number of references to conflict, captures, and the humiliation of rival kings. Political instability, once manageable, cascaded into wider societal turmoil. The Maya world, which had flourished through a delicate equilibrium of nature and governance, entered a period of deep stress. Yet the collapse was not uniform. Just as the Nazca lines reveal mysterious intentions across the desert, the Maya decline reveals uneven patterns across the rainforest. Some cities fell abruptly, abandoned in eerie silence. Others lingered for centuries longer. Some populations migrated north, eventually contributing to later Maya cities, such as Chichen Itza. This variation complicates the narrative, reminding listeners that the collapse was not a sudden disappearance like the mythical stories suggest, but a gradual fracturing, a dimming rather than an extinguishing. The Maya did not vanish. Their descendants still live throughout Mesoamerica today, preserving languages, traditions, and cultural memory. Still, the abandonment of major cities remains haunting. Imagine walking through Tikal at its height. Markets bustling with traders carrying obsidian, jade, ceramics, and cacao. Priests ascending temple steps to observe Venus rising. Scribes painting folded codices with intricate glyphs. Athletes competing in stone ball courts. Farmers tending to maize fields under the forest canopy. Now, imagine that within a few generations, many of these places fell into quiet disuse. The ceremonial drums went silent. The plazas emptied. Temples, once alive with worship and astronomy, became resting places for vines and roots. Rain and humidity softened the edges of stone carvings. Nature reclaimed what human ambition had built. Archaeologists continue to uncover clues about this transition. One remarkable insight involves the reservoirs that sustained Maya cities during dry seasons. Sediment samples reveal layers of contaminated water near the end of the Classic period, evidence of toxic algae blooms caused by pollution and environmental degradation. As elite populations grew and limestone plaster production intensified, mercury and other toxins accumulated in water systems. This environmental breakdown would have affected health, agriculture, and ritual life, adding to the pressures already weighing on Maya society. Just as the desert preserved the Nazca lines, the jungle preserved the environmental signatures of civilization under strain. But beyond environmental and political causes, spiritual and cultural factors likely played deep roles in the collapse. The Maya worldview was rooted in harmony between cosmic cycles, royal authority, and agricultural fertility. Kings were seen as intermediaries between the human world and divine forces. They performed rituals meant to secure prosperity and cosmic balance. When droughts became severe and prolonged, these rituals may have seemed to lose their power. Faith in rulers weakened. Political authority fractured. A civilization built on cyclical time found itself trapped in a crisis that defied expected rhythms. The calm narration here invites listeners to imagine the psychological weight of such uncertainty. The slow erosion of belief, the societal anxiety as cosmic order appeared to falter. As cities were abandoned, the jungle did not rush in immediately. It crept in quietly. Leaves accumulated on temple steps. Birds nested in palace corridors. Roots pressed into cracks in stone lintels. Slowly, patiently, nature wove itself back into architecture. For centuries, these places were known only to the surrounding communities. When archaeologists rediscovered them in the 19th and 20th centuries, they were greeted not by bustling cities, but by towering ruins swallowed by forests. The contrast between past brilliance and present quiet creates the dreamy, reflective mood typical of nighttime history documentaries. The Maya collapse also challenges a common myth, the idea that civilizations vanish overnight. In reality, the classical Maya cities declined for many reasons. Environmental stress, political conflict, drought, shifting trade, and the gradual weakening of royal authority. The people did not disappear. They adapted, migrated, reorganized, and survived. They continued to build, farm, and create, even as the great centers of power faded. Today, over 6 million Maya descendants preserve languages like Kizh, Yucatec, Tzotzil, and many more, along with traditional weaving, music, and cosmology. As this section draws to a close, the transition leads gently toward a new kind of mystery, one set in the rugged highlands of North America, where petroglyphs, oral traditions, and archaeological puzzles hint at a culture that rose and fell long before European contact. The story moves from the humid jungles of the Maya to the windswept plateaus of the ancestral Puebloans, continuing the exploration of civilizations that flourished brilliantly before fading into silence. High in the rugged mesas and canyons of the American Southwest lie the remains of a civilization that shaped the landscape with extraordinary wisdom and care. The ancestral Puebloans, once called the Anasazi, created a cultural world defined by stone dwellings, celestial alignments, and agricultural mastery in a land where water was scarce and life depended on cooperation. Their most iconic structures, such as those in Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, and Canyon de Chelly, remain perched atop cliffs or nestled within canyon walls like silent stone guardians. These places, preserved by dry air and sheltered rock, glow with the aura of a civilization that flourished in harmony with its environment, only to leave behind one of the most debated disappearances in North American archaeology. The calm narration leads listeners through sun-baked mesas, past juniper-scented winds, and into the shadowed alcoves where ancient homes still cling to sandstone cliffs. Here, hundreds of rooms stand stacked like honeycombs carved into rock. These structures, multi-storied, carefully engineered, made of stone and adobe, demonstrate remarkable architectural skill. Some villages seem almost impossible in their construction, difficult to access, yet perfectly positioned for defense, warmth, and observation of the sky. The interplay of sunlight and stone at these sites creates a gentle rhythm that mirrors the measured, careful pace of ancestral Puebloan life. The story of the ancestral Puebloans stretches back thousands of years. Early communities built pit houses, semi-subterranean dwellings dug into the earth, and later transitioned to above-ground structures with complex layouts. Over generations, these homes evolved into vast settlements with ceremonial chambers known as kivas, which sat at the heart of spiritual and communal life. In these circular, stone-lined rooms, rituals connected people to their ancestors, to the land, and to the cosmos. Firelight flickered against plastered walls, smoke curled upward through ventilation shafts, and the community gathered to honor cycles of agriculture, seasons, and celestial bodies. One of the most sophisticated centers of their civilization was Chaco Canyon. This immense cultural hub flourished between 900 and 1150 CE, during which time the ancestral Puebloans constructed massive great houses, monumental buildings with hundreds of rooms arranged with extraordinary precision. Some of these structures aligned with solstices, lunar cycles, and cardinal directions, reflecting a deep understanding of astronomy. Roads extended across the desert from Chaco like spokes from a wheel, straight and wide, connecting outlying settlements across miles of difficult terrain. These roads were not merely functional. They may have been ceremonial pathways, reinforcing cultural unity and spiritual significance. Yet despite these achievements, the region was fragile. Like the Maya, the ancestral Puebloans lived in an environment where agriculture required tight coordination and careful resource management. Corn, beans, and squash formed the core of their diet, but these crops depended on limited rainfall and stored water. When the climate shifted and periods of drought became more severe, food security weakened. Tree-ring data reveals long droughts during the 12th and 13th centuries, events that would have strained communities already living at the margins of agricultural viability. Archaeological evidence shows that as conditions worsened, social and political tensions grew. Defensive architecture increased. Settlements moved to more easily defended cliffs and mesas. Walls grew thicker. Entryways narrowed. The once open plazas and accessible villages of earlier centuries were replaced by fortress-like structures that reveal a shifting social landscape. This evolution hints at rising conflict, perhaps between neighboring groups, or perhaps internal tensions fueled by scarcity and the struggle to survive. Still, the collapse of ancestral Puebloan centers is not a story of sudden disappearance, but one of movement and transformation. Around 1300 CE, many of the major settlements, Mesa Verde among them, were abandoned. The people migrated south and east, eventually forming new communities among the modern Pueblo nations, such as the Hopi, Zuni, and various Rio Grande Pueblos. Their traditions, beliefs, and cosmology did not vanish. They changed landscapes, carrying ancestral memory into new valleys and mesas where their descendants live to this day. The cliff dwellings themselves, however, remain behind. Empty homes built into stone alcoves became quiet echo chambers that watched centuries pass. Wind slipped through doorways once framed with wooden beams. Rainwater pooled in catch basins carved by hands long gone. Animals nested in rooms where families once cooked corn, shaped pottery, and told stories around firelight. The stillness of these abandoned structures creates a striking contrast with the vibrant life they once held, a contrast that deepens the sense of mystery around why entire regions were left behind. Another layer of intrigue comes from the disappearance of Chaco Canyon as a ceremonial center. Once bustling with ritual gatherings and long-distance traders carrying turquoise, shells, feathers, and pottery, Chaco eventually fell into disuse. Its great houses were not destroyed, they were simply emptied. The roads leading toward it faded into desert winds. The reasons for this abandonment may include drought, depleted resources, or shifts in religious authority. But like many ancient mysteries, the final answer remains elusive. Chaco's story is one of power rising and receding like a tide, leaving an architectural monument to a lost era of spiritual and cultural unity. The ancestral Puebloans leave behind intricate pottery decorated with black-on-white geometric designs, storytelling symbols, and patterns that echo themes of balance, movement, and life cycles. These artifacts, along with preserved footprints, farming terraces, and stone tools, paint a picture of a people who lived with deep intentionality. Their culture revolved around cycles of nature, reciprocity, and respect for the land. Even in migration, they carried these values forward. The calm tone of this section lingers on the haunting beauty of cliff dwellings bathed in soft sunset light, where orange sandstone glows and shadows deepen beneath overhangs. The ruins do not feel like empty shells. They feel like paused moments, as if life inside them could resume at any moment. The silence itself seems purposeful, as though the land continues to guard the memory of those who once lived closely with its rhythms. This examination of the ancestral Puebloans reinforces a recurring theme across the documentary. Civilizations do not vanish without leaving echoes. Their footprints continue through descendants, oral traditions, and landscapes shaped by centuries of habitation. What ends in one place often begins anew elsewhere. As this section draws to a close, the narrative prepares to move across continents once more, to the Mediterranean, where a technologically advanced society built magnificent palaces and vibrant seafaring networks, only to fall into obscurity after sudden destruction. The story shifts from canyon cliffs to island shores, setting the stage for the mysterious end of the Minoan civilization and its enduring connection to myth, fire, and sea. The story of the Minoans unfolds on the sunlit shores of Crete, an island washed by the sapphire waters of the Mediterranean. Their civilization rose more than 4,000 years ago, flourishing during an age when many parts of Europe were still in relative darkness. The Minoans built palaces that shimmered with color, crafted intricate frescoes depicting dolphins, flowers, and mythic scenes, and mastered trade across the Aegean Sea. Their world was a tapestry woven from artistry, seafaring skill, and ritual life, a civilization that seems almost dreamlike in its elegance. And then, In a sequence of events that remains partly shrouded in mystery, their cities faltered, their palaces fell, and the vibrancy of Minoan culture faded into silence. The calm narration guides listeners across the island of Crete toward the legendary palace of Knossos, the largest and most iconic Minoan structure. This sprawling complex, with its labyrinthine corridors, storerooms, and fresco-lined walls, inspired ancient Greek myths of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. Though these tales were born centuries later, they reflect something essential about how the ruins felt to early visitors: vast, intricate, and mysterious. The palace suggests advanced administration and vibrant cultural life. It housed workshops for potters and metalworkers, storerooms filled with giant clay pithoy jars, ceremonial chambers, and elite residences. The architecture was sophisticated, featuring light wells, drainage systems, and multi-story construction at a time when much of Europe was building in wood and earth. Minoan art brings their world vividly to life. Frescoes show scenes of joyful movement, dancers, bull leapers, nature, and marine life. Unlike many ancient cultures that emphasized warfare in their art, the Minoans often depicted graceful activities, rituals, or peaceful landscapes. Their pottery displays exquisite geometric patterns and natural motifs: spirals, lilies, octopuses, and waves. These symbols reflect a worldview tuned to cycles of nature, fertility, and the sea. The absence of fortification walls at many Minoan centers has led some historians to believe they enjoyed long periods of internal peace or relied on naval dominance rather than land defenses. Whether or not this is fully accurate, the imagery of the Minoans continues to evoke a harmonious, aesthetically rich civilization that stood apart from its contemporaries. Yet beneath the beauty lies one of history's great contrasts. For all their accomplishments, the Minoans left behind no readable written records explaining their beliefs, political systems, or daily lives. Their script, known as linear, remains undeciphered. It decorates tablets and pottery fragments, but has resisted all attempts at translation. Without their written voice, we reconstruct their world through architecture, art, trade patterns, and scattered references from later cultures. This silence deepens the mystery of their disappearance, a powerful civilization without a surviving explanation of its own fate. One of the leading theories about the Minoan collapse centers on a cataclysmic event: the eruption of the Thera volcano, now the island of Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, Thera exploded with one of the largest eruptions in recorded history. The blast sent ash clouds sweeping across the Aegean, triggered tsunamis, and reshaped coastlines. The eruption itself may not have instantly destroyed the Minoans, but it likely destabilized their society. Tsunamis could have wiped out fleets and coastal towns. Ashfall could have disrupted agriculture, cooling temperatures, and damaging fields. Trade networks, the lifeblood of Minoan prosperity, may have faltered. When the calm narration pauses to imagine this disaster, it draws the listener into the tension between the island's serene beauty and the violent forces hidden beneath its surface. However, the decline of the Minoans was not instantaneous. Archaeological evidence suggests they rebuilt after the eruption. Palaces were repaired, trade resumed, and cultural life continued. But something had shifted. Over time, new powers rose in the region, especially the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece. By around 1450 BCE, many Minoan palaces outside Knossos were destroyed, possibly by invasions, internal conflict, or further environmental strain. The Mycenaeans eventually took control of Knossos itself, adopting aspects of Minoan culture and writing their own linear B script, an early form of Greek. This blending of cultures obscures the line between Minoan decline and Mycenaean expansion, making it hard to determine exactly how or why the older civilization faded. One evocative idea is that the Minoans, weakened by natural disasters, political upheaval, and disruptions in trade, gradually lost their influence. Their artistry persisted for a time, but their administrative structures may have faltered. Palaces that once served as centers of governance and ritual became vulnerable to internal strife or external conquest. The collapse was likely a long, uneven process rather than a single dramatic moment. Some communities may have continued local traditions even as larger centers fell. Others may have been absorbed into Mycenaean society. The narrative treads gently through this uncertainty, embracing the gaps in knowledge that give ancient history its dreamlike quality. The connection between the Minoans and later Greek mythology adds another layer of fascination. Stories of Atlantis, Plato's legendary island civilization that vanished into the sea, have often been linked to the Minoans and the Thera eruption. While Atlantis is a philosophical allegory rather than a historical account, the parallels are intriguing. A powerful maritime culture destroyed in a single catastrophic event. Whether or not the story was inspired by Minoan history, the imagery of an advanced island civilization lost to natural forces captures the same sense of awe and mystery that surrounds the real Minoans. As listeners move through this quiet exploration, they encounter the soft echo of ancient footsteps in ruined palaces and the distant roar of a volcano that altered the course of Mediterranean history. The gentle tone lingers on the contrasts. The Minoans' graceful art versus the violence of the eruption. Their strong maritime networks versus their eventual disappearance. Their luminous culture versus their unreadable script. These contrasts create a calm, almost meditative curiosity that fits the nighttime documentary style. Today, the remnants of Minoan life remain scattered across Crete. Fresco fragments preserved in museums, palace foundations warmed by sunlight, and pottery designs echoed in modern Cretan art. Visitors walk through Knossos, its red columns restored and its murals reconstructed, imagining a world both familiar and alien. The civilization that once shaped the seas now exists only in ruins and the faint whispers of undeciphered writing. As this section comes to an end, the narrative prepares to move toward a civilization shaped not by islands and ocean currents, but by forests, mountains, and rivers. The next chapter steps into the world of the Mississippian mound builders, another society whose monumental architecture and sudden decline leave behind more questions than answers. Across the river valleys of ancient North America, long before European contact, the Mississippian culture raised monumental earthworks that still rise from the landscape like quiet green pyramids. Cahokia, the largest of their cities, once thrived with tens of thousands of inhabitants, its central Monk's Mound towering over plazas, homes, and ceremonial spaces. Wooden solar calendars marked seasonal cycles, while trade networks stretched across the continent, carrying shells, copper, pottery, and sacred symbols. For centuries, the Mississippians cultivated maize, held complex rituals, and developed sophisticated social hierarchies. Yet by the 14th century, many of their great centers were abandoned. The reasons remain uncertain. Environmental pressures, such as flooding and resource depletion, likely strained their agricultural systems. Social unrest, shifting climate patterns, or disease may have further disrupted daily life. Whatever the cause, the bustling plazas slowly emptied, and the mounds became silent markers of a vanished world. Today, these earthworks stand as gentle reminders of a civilization that shaped its environment with patience and vision. Their disappearance echoes the same theme found across many ancient societies, a flourishing world that, over time, loosened its hold and faded into memory. As the narrative prepares for the final section, the story turns toward reflection on rise, fall, and the enduring mystery of human civilizations.